Yo, last year I made a video stating that I would no longer be making any gear review videos, particularly ones that are part of a launch where multiple YouTubers do videos on something, or anything that's just part of a marketing campaign. And sure enough, naturally, every time that I touch a musical instrument, I get a comment saying, "I thought you said you were done with gear videos." So my response to all that is to review every single piece of gear that I own right now in this video. I would guesstimate that maybe between 90 and 95% of my daily activities are fueled by spite. There's actually a few other good reasons why I'm doing this. If you haven't noticed, I'm sitting in a brand new recording studio that I had built, and in a few weeks there will be an epic video about that coming out, so stay tuned for that. But for now, well, let's go to the other room. Anyway, in the process of moving all of my belongings, I realized, wait a minute, what a perfect time to itemize all of my gear for my insurance. And what better way is there to itemize it than showing myself holding it while blurting out the model number. And while I'm doing that, why not rate it on a Gen Z meme tier system? But would anybody really want to watch that? Well, okay then, let's kill 5 or 6 birds with one stone. Well, I wouldn't be shooting stones, would I? Okay, one last thing, just a few disclaimers. Believe it or not, this isn't all of the gear that I own. Some stuff I just missed due to the logistics of it being in an unexpected place. Some stuff people are borrowing that I forgot about. Some stuff is not released. Some stuff is under NDA. And then some stuff is just too monotonous or tedious or boring. For example, I've already made multiple videos about my modular synth. There's no point in me redundantly going through all of those modules again in this video. Another example, I have like a dozen analog metronomes. They all go tick-tock. I don't really care about the difference between one or another. And finally, do you know what happens when you build and move to a new studio? You have to buy a bunch of new gear. But if I made the title of this video have all of those disclaimers, you wouldn't have clicked it and you wouldn't be watching me talk way too long instead of just getting on with it and going through all the gear. Let's go.
In case you took a few chunks of buckshot to the head and spent the last 10 years in a coma, this is how this tier ranking system works. F tier is dog shit. There's nothing redeemable about it at all other than human civilization gaining the knowledge of where rock bottom is and how dog shit things can get. D tier is really bad, but possibly usable in some circumstances of desperation. For example, you know those digital cable boxes? The UI experience of using those fucking things is the definition of D tier. C tier is good enough. It simply does what it's supposed to and fulfills your expectations at an absolute minimum, like a vending machine or a roll of toilet paper, or any winner of the Democratic primary. B tier is generally a good value. Nothing that'll give you an orgasm in your overalls, but usually worth every goddamn penny. If someone stole your B tier item, you'd be fully willing to buy another one at full price. A tier is as good as you can reasonably get. In the synthesizer or FX world, A tier is no fluke. A company has to have years of properly honing in research and development, product design, and customer support to be able to make an A tier product. It's the cream of the crop. S tier is not of this world. Or if it is, it's the result of every star aligning just perfectly in a miraculous way. An S-tier product comes but once a decade in an entire category of products. It changes the way future products in that category are made, and it changes the artists who use them. Let's go back to Ben while he's on the floor surrounded by garbage, which is a pretty good metaphor for his overall quality of life while filming this.
The Novation FL-Key 37. A little bit too big for me to bring on the road, obviously too small for me to use in the studio. I like my 88 keys. These days, a C. I would give the Mini Freak I would give it an A. Now the Micro Freak, on the other hand, is probably one of the best values in all of affordable synthesizers. Easily. I mean, top 5, top 3 maybe even. However, that being said, I have 1 or 2 keys that aren't working, which for my sake is fine, because I absolutely hate this keyboard and always just put MIDI into it, but that knocks it down from an S to an A. Casio SK5. The sampler is way more powerful and fun than the Casio SK1. However, it does not have the human voice patch that the SK1 has. You know, the one that goes, ho, 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 ho. It's pretty much useless to me, other than the nostalgic purposes, so I don't know, a D. The Ultimusic Solar 42, one of the last pieces of gear that I reviewed. Wow, It's pretty incredible. It just makes you make music that you wouldn't make otherwise. I'm gonna give it an A. I wanna give it an S, but realistically, you're not gonna use this in the majority of your tracks because it is its own thing. It has its quirks, but easily an A. The original Nord rack with the expansion card, I would say this is like one of the top 5 vaporwave synths for me. I dig it. I might dig it just because I'm really used to it. It is pretty limiting. Most people these days would probably not like it that much. So realistically, giving it a C. The Akai APC64, my God, this has transformed not only the way that I think about music, but the way that I think about creativity, the way that I think about air, earth, planets. Just kidding, I literally never even turned this thing on because I didn't realize that it only works with Ableton, and it has a bunch of CD gate outputs, which I thought would be useful. Anyway, I'm not gonna put this on a tier list. The Roland TR-8, the first of like 600 different TR-808 emulation drum machines that Roland would go on to release. I bought the 707 software add-on for it at the time. Not long after I bought it, the TR-8S came out, and I got really bitter, and I really wished that I had just waited and gotten that. And now, many years later, after playing with the TR-8S quite extensively, I like this thing way better. It's way simpler, it's super easy to program a beat. It just does what it's supposed to do, and I actually like it a lot better than the upgraded version. There are some UI quirks that still piss me off quite a lot though, so I'm giving it a B. Gotta keep the static at bay. Starting this box with the big boys, the Erica Synths Perkins HD1 drum machine. Man, this thing is pretty brilliant. I feel like this is one of the things that's probably going to increase in value over time, almost for sure. You can make the most unique sequences. For me, after spending a year with it and playing with it a whole bunch and hooking it up to a whole bunch of other things and I don't think I ever once actually used it in a recorded song, I guess I would say it's a B, which, yeah, but it would be an S for so many other people. And I don't think I've ever heard of one person disliking it. Does anybody watching this know who Stefan Bonner or maybe Forrest Griffin is? They're both kind of legacy UFC fighters who absorbed insane amounts of punishment, and then they would come out winning on top. And that's kind of the story of the Behringer B-Control BCF 2000. I have toured around the world with this thing. I've spilled beer in it, I've spilled water in it, I've done things like this live. The top of it's literally coming apart and pieces are crumbling off. I wonder if I could just like punch that back in. Heh, it works. Yeah, this is 18 years old. It can legally buy porn. Anyway, I'm gonna give it an A. Then we have the very similar BCR 2000, which just has a bunch of knobs, and you might be thinking, hey, that's a ZAC on it. Well, that's because this is a Zacklincer. This is just a panel that you could put on top of it, and then there's alternate firmware that you could buy that turns this into a pretty incredibly powerful sequencer. Well, maybe I'll give it a B. It doesn't have motorized faders. Little pro tip here that I assume a lot of people already do. If you're packing a bunch of synths, you want to write the name of the synthesizer on the PSU, otherwise you'll hate yourself when you're unpacking. And of course you want to write it with a paint marker so it actually shows up on the black. The Vector Synth is, every single time I turn it on, I'm still blown away. I'm blown away that this can exist. I know what hardware is running inside of it. I'm blown away that it can exist on that hardware. It does something that no other hardware synthesizer can really pull off. And for that reason, I gotta give it an A. The Presonus Monitor Station V2. This is one of 3 or 4 different monitor stations, not this exact model that I own, and every single one of them got a scratchy pot within the first year, which is like the biggest utter fail that you could have. So D, I guess. The Antelope Audio Zen Go interface. This is my first and only Antelope Audio interface. I know that the clocking is really exceptional in Antelope Audio interfaces. So for example, if you're trying to record video through a Sony FX6 and then trying to record audio on your computer, you'll want to use one of these because it'll clock perfectly in time and it won't run out of sync over a long shoot. I think it's made well. I think that the pre's on it sound great. I think that the UI is pretty confusing, and I hate the fact that you can buy effects for it, that there's a little store where you could get DLC for your audio interface. For that reason, I give it a C. This one's gonna be a weird one. The Erica Synths Syntrix 2. When I got the first Erica Synths Syntrix, I was just borrowing it to do a video review, and then I sent it back, and I really wanted it. I didn't want it to make music on. I don't think that these things have the most innovative synthesis in the world. It's just the interface is so fun to patch around with on this little matrix. And I really wished that I could get it back. So when the second one came out, I got one to keep. So it's worth mentioning that I just went upstairs and brought this down because it was in my living room. That's where it lives. It lives in my living room because it is a fun synthesizer playground. And I think that it is worth it for that if you're a synth junkie. That being said, as something in a recording studio, I give it a C. All right, I got a little surprise, ready? The Alesis Air Effects. So this thing, you used to be able to put it on a mic stand, and I guess it was for DJs, and so you would pump music through it, and it was an effects processor, and you could select the different things. It conveniently has a list on the bottom, since of course you could see that when it's mounted to a mic stand like this. In the early 2000s, I'd say that I used this for maybe 2 or 3 years on stage when touring. You just do this, and you know, it's a pretty performative, cool thing to do on, that's actually a fucking stupid thing to do on stage. I probably looked like an asshole. Anyway, the effects by today's standards are deplorable. By the standards of the early 2000s, were still pretty shitty. So I mean, this is like a D all around. The only saving grace is how weird it is. The Scorp Pyramid, very powerful generative sequencer. Quite a learning curve. I kind of wish that I got the Hermod, the module instead. Definitely never used this trackpad or anything like that for any reason. I feel like it just belongs on the modular and it has no space to be around the modular. I don't know. I just never really use it. I would give it a C, I guess. The Roland Touch Bassline TB3. What a terrible idea that somehow ended up working out in the end. It doesn't have an envelope knob, but somehow you don't really care when you're playing with it. It is so easy to program acid lines. It sounds close enough to a real TB303, and it has the scatter effects. It's so much fun to use. This is an A. Speaking of acid makers, the Cyclone Analogic BassBot Make 2 is probably the best acid machine I've ever used in my life. In fact, after I got it, I literally sold my TB303. It has a run stop out, a clock out, an accent out, a gate out, a CV out, a filter in, a VCO out, MIDI in and out. It's extremely easy to program a customized melodic or just weird acid line. It's extremely easy to randomize it within specific parameters. It's extremely easy to have custom randomized arpeggiators. If you care about acid music, and I care about acid music a whole lot, it is an S-tier synthesizer. The Roland TR6S, not success, but 6S. I don't know if it was a success or not. I'm not sure what Roland was thinking with this one. It can only be powered via batteries or USB in, and USB's pretty damn noisy. It only has left and right outputs. However, has a lot of sounds on board. The sequencer's easy enough to use. It's a really good drum machine if you're a YouTuber. Like if I want to put any of the other synths that you see in this video against a beat and MIDI sync it, I could just power this on and eventually it's good to go. I mean, all right, it's fun. But a C. The Furman M8 power conditioner and the Furman, fuck is this one? I like Furmans because they're affordable, they're tested, they actually give performance test scores and stuff like that. I don't know if they still do it, at least the last time I bought one. And yeah, they last like decades. So B. The Mackie Pro FX 8 version 2. It's a little noisy. It seems rugged, like it's made out of metal, but these faders can bend really easily. I'm sure they will on this move. It still has the Mackie mixer quality where you could use it for like an entire decade, yet still every single time you turn it on and try and do something, you stare at it for 10 minutes in bewilderment of how it works. I miss the old school 1402s, but I've kept this around for a reason, so a C. The Pioneer DDJ 400. It's really lightweight. The faders have stood up the test of time. It has headphone out, it has master out. It's a pretty solid basic way to get into DJing if you already have record box or tractor or something. So I don't know. B, the rare Roland SH32 digital synth, part of my Vaporwave series. Not that great, not that intuitive, but there's been a few times where I've gotten some of the craziest sounds and sequences on it, and that's the reason I keep it around. But generally, a D. The Akai XR20 Beat Production Center. It's like the golden retriever of drum machines. It even adds an auxiliary output outside of just the stereo outputs. It can run on batteries. The sounds are pretty good. It's super easy to use. You could tap in a beat almost instantly. I give it an A. Tascam linear PCM recorder Dr. 60D Make 2. I've used this like 2 times, and both times it fucked up my recording. So obviously an F. I don't even see a point in packing it. This is not a VHS tape. This is the Yamaha QI10 music sequencer. Oh boy, this is for people who hate themselves. This is probably the worst experience I've ever had programming music into a sequencer. And yeah, I mean, it's a clear F. I'm not one to rate bad synths like you would rate a bad movie where it's so bad that it's good. This is still clearly an F. I've thought about making a YouTube video where I try and make a song on it, but I think that the idea of doing that is funny, and the actual process of doing it would just make me kill myself. This is a Pioneer SR202W reverberation amplifier. It has a spring inside. It's pretty cheap sounding. It's not great. I think I used it for a snare once or something and never really used it again other than just keeping it around. I don't know. D. I imagine that a lot of people are watching this and saying, well, if you don't like all this stuff, why don't you give it to me or give it away? A lot of times if I'm moving or reorganizing or just cleaning, I reach out to some musicians in my area and say, hey, if you help me out for a day, I'll give you a bunch of free gear. And I really do give away a ton of free gear to people who help me out. But everybody's a goddamn flake. An original Roland TR-626 rhythm composer. I don't use it all that often, but I do use it more than one would expect. It has some really juicy percussion sounds on it. I mean, I guess I'll give it a B. The Roland Phraselab MC09, this is peak late 90s rave scene explosion. TB303 prices are through the roof. Roland is desperately trying to take advantage of this scene. Instead of releasing another analog synthesizer that does what a TB303 does, they release a bunch of really terrible sounding digital synths that very poorly try to do what a TB303 does. And in the process of accomplishing that goal, they pretty much shit the bed every single time. And this would probably be peak bed shit. It's an F. But it's an F that's a piece of history, and that's why I'm not giving it up for anything. The Korg Chaos Pad KP3 is what inspired this abomination, the Chaosilator Pro. What an absolutely fun way to produce music in theory, and an absolute dog shit way to produce music in reality. It's an F. A Behringer CMD DV1 MIDI controller, and it appears to have that terrible rubber that turns into syrup after a decade. I probably bought it at like a Sam Ash or Guitar Center in some sort of tour emergency. I suppose I would remember it if it screwed up my whole set, so I'm sure it worked fine, but the fact that it has these terrible syrup knobs, that would bring it down to a D. I don't know why I'm even talking about this thing. I'm not even gonna pack it. This is a big one. The Polyend Dreadbox Medusa Hybrid Synthesizer. Easily one of my favorite synths of all time. I've used it in plenty of my music. Every single time that I turn it on and play with it for more than half an hour, I end up clearing the next 2 days and just working on music. It's one of the most inspirational pieces of gear that I've ever played with, and also one of the reasons why I'm so close with Polyend today, because I think that this is sheer brilliance. It's built like a tank. It mixes an extremely powerful sequencer with a hybrid of digital and analog synths. It's just bonkers, and it's easily S tier. It's so S tier that I have another one just in case this one breaks, because they're not made anymore and they haven't been made for quite a bit. If you can find a used Medusa and can afford it, jump on it. Another old school Polyend piece of gear is the Seq, S-E-Q. It's just a sequencer. It's great. For its time, it was probably A tier. Now I would knock it down to B tier simply because the poly-end play has made a lot of its functions irrelevant. The only thing that this really does now is looks pretty in my studio, and if I really need this long of a sequence all in one shot, then this comes in handy. But otherwise, I just use the poly-end plays MIDI mode. The Dave Smith Instruments Evolver. This is kind of what started the whole company, I believe. I think this was the first thing that they made. It's no longer made anymore. Much like the Medusa, it has digital and analog oscillators and a pretty powerful sequencer. It's not easy to program, but it does sound spectacular. I'm gonna give it a B. And if I had the Poly Evolver keyboard, I would easily give that an A. The Novation Launchpad X. It does what it's supposed to do. C. The Torso Electronics T1 Generative Sequencer. I honestly think that I probably would have rated the Squarp Pyramid higher if I didn't have this, but it's just so much smaller and more intuitive. It would take 10 minutes for me to describe exactly why I like this so much, but I would give it a B. The Dreadbox Hades, I believe that this is the reissue. I used it in a video and I'm not sure that I ever used it again. I certainly didn't put it in my modular just simply because I have so many things that do the exact same thing, including other Dreadbox modules. It sounds excellent. It's relatively affordable. It's just that in my particular studio setup, it's not doing anything that special. So for me, it's a D. In general, I would say a B. So let's put it at a B on the tier list. And I think that this is something that I should be giving away to somebody. The Uno Synth Pro X, I believe, is paraphonic. It's portable. It's analog. It has a relatively basic sequencer in it. I think it sounds quite good. I'm just not sure who they made it for. Like, it's a perfect size for something I would play a live show with. I just don't see a world where I would play a live show with one of these. Because I can't find a real use case for it, I want to give it a D, but I think that that's a little bit harsh, and I do think that there probably is a use case for it, so let's bump it up to a C. All right, let's knock some of this out. The poly-end play is very limited, also very powerful and innovative. Across the board, people are either using it consistently and saying that it's a vital part of their studio, or they just didn't click with it. I definitely clicked with it. The price of it has come down, and as I mentioned before, it completely replaces the poly-end Seek with a more powerful grid-based sequencer like this. That alone is worth the money. I'm gonna personally give it a B because this came out. It has onboard synthesizers, stereo samples, and a bunch of other features. And this I would give an A. By the way, I've declared this a million times on this channel, but if this is the first time you're seeing me talk about anything gear related, I am friends with the poly-end people. Good friends. I like them very much. I actually have a lot of back and forth with what goes into their products. So therefore, I'm probably biased. So if you're watching this and you find yourself wanting to buy one of poly-end's products and you're asking yourself, am I being influenced by a shill right now? What you should be asking yourself is, why the fuck am I watching a grown man sit on the floor in his basement packing a box? Anyway, the OG poly-end tracker is the first standalone hardware tracker, and it was quite a huge risk for poly-end to make. They hit it out of the park. This really put the company on the map. It's a great device. I have to also give it a B because it was more recently replaced by the Tracker Plus. It's worth mentioning that I personally always kind of despised the tracker workflow until I started playing with poly-end tracker. I apparently like hardware trackers. They make me write music way differently than I would otherwise. So the OG tracker is still being supported and updated by poly-end, but the poly-end Tracker Plus has an upgraded chipset which allows it to have stereo samples, onboard synthesis, drum synths, things like that. It's great. It's by far the most powerful hardware tracker money can buy. But it's not perfect. It's not a phenom or a miracle. It's just a really quality piece of equipment that I believe is worth the money, so I'm gonna give it an A. Now, when playing with the poly-end tracker, one thing that I always craved was a battery-operated version, maybe one that I could fit in my pocket or just slip into my bag a little bit easier, because it is a great portable music-making machine. And to the rescue comes the poly-end Tracker Mini, which is still probably my go-to portable music making device. I honestly like it more than the Teenage Engineering OP1. The firmware is consistently being updated. It supports stereo samples. I believe that it has onboard synths now. But after spending so much time with it, I honestly think I'm gonna rate it a C. Most importantly for me, I cannot get the clickety-clackety workflow going that I can get on the OG Tracker or the Tracker Plus. And nowadays, unless I'm traveling, I almost always start something here in the kitchen and then immediately just go get the Tracker Plus and finish it there. So if you are into trackers, and especially if you're into portable music making, do know that you can make production quality tracks, completely finished, ready for uploading to Spotify or whatever you want to do with it, all right here. You could render it out and be done with it. It has great sounding effects and a really good dynamic limiter, but for me, I'm only really using it when circumstances force me to use something this portable. But this is my top choice when those circumstances exist. Anyway, the original Dirty Wave Mate Tracker. I have the 48th one ever made. This thing does a lot. It packs a lot of power. It has onboard synthesis. I'm not sure if it's original onboard synthesis. I know that it's using some of the mutable code. I really do wish that it had an onboard microphone. I really do wish that it had a better battery. I can't even get halfway through writing even a simple song without having to plug it in. Fortunately, both of these things are corrected in the brand new version of the M8 that just came out. But one major problem for me that I don't think the new model corrects is just how tiny the screen is. I'd find myself squinting and going like this a lot, but what are you gonna do? You're putting a tracker into a device this big. There's really no way around that. I mean, you can make the text bigger, but then you won't be able to see your sequence. When I charge the battery and turn it on, it does this. I did make some really nice sounding sequences with it, so. But releasing and selling and bug fixing and supporting a product that you designed yourself probably results in a lot of really good R&D. So I bet that the new M8 is pretty badass. The original Korg Volca FM, I have ignored almost all of the Volca product line. However, I heard that you could load DX7 patches on this Volca FM, and I got excited and bought it in an impulse buy. Obviously, it doesn't have as many operators as a DX7, but it gets pretty damn close. I've given this thing a ton of use. If I want to try out a MIDI sequencer, this is usually what I pick up and plug it into. It's also great if you have a gear-related YouTube channel. It's super powerful, and for the price, it's incredible. It's an A. The Dreadbox Nymphs. Can you believe that this tiny VHS-sized piece of metal is a 6-voice analog polysynth? I thought that there was some sort of catch when I first heard about it. There's no catch. It's legit. It sounds absolutely excellent, especially if you're putting it through reverb and delay. My only wish is that this sort of difficult to learn menu could just be some buttons over here in this empty space, and if we could just have some DC power instead of USB power, because USB power is noisy. If you don't mind the menu and the power thing, it's an S, but I'm gonna give it an A. The Decade Bridge Bora Noise Drone Synth, aka the first synthesizer I ever bought on Etsy. It is a very weird little device. You could press all these buttons to patch things in and out of each other, and it has all these different oscillators, and it makes some pretty crazy noises. But will you use it in your music? Maybe. If you need to step outside of your normal boundaries or use a drone/swarm synth. Otherwise, you'll get bored of it after the honeymoon period and pick it up every now and then and have a little bit of fun. But it's a solid B. The Sonicware Texture Lab. Admittedly, I've not spent that much time with this. I believe that this would be my favorite of the Sonicware machines, but that's not saying that much because I kind of despise the workflow in the Sonicware machines, but this one is the most interesting as it is a granular synthesizer. I like that it has DIN MIDI in and out. I feel like I can get past the difficult UI with something as specific as a grain synth rather than a production center where I'm trying to make an entire track. It feels like a toy, but it also is extremely affordable, so I'll give it a C. The Arturia BeatStep Pro. Look at all these gates. Look at them. And I don't know how much it costs these days, but look it up. It's dirt cheap for what it does. And the gift keeps on giving. They keep updating the firmware with more features that make it more and more powerful. It is one of my favorite sequencers of all time. It would be an easy S-tier product if not for one major flaw. This little port here. That is noisy as fuck, to the point where they've actually shipped a little adapter to where you can hook up external power and then hook it up to your computer separately. That knocks it down to an A. The Boss RC505 loop station. I used to bring the giant Boss loop pedals on tour with me, but they had some really crippling bugs. And instead of updating the firmware, fixing those bugs, they released this. which you can't step on, by the way. These are for your fingers. So you have to hook up a MIDI pedal to trigger these, and then there's some bugs with the MIDI triggering and synchronization. More importantly, who is this for? How many beatboxers do you think there are on the planet who need 5 channels of looping? The only reason I purchased this back in the day was out of absolute necessity, and it still powers on and it still works, so I'll be kind and give it a D. The Empress Euro Bureau is an Empress Zoya in modular form. It's as powerful as the Zoya is, which is incredibly powerful. In fact, I had this open for me, literally. Left on stage for half an hour. It made lush, generative, reactive soundscapes, and all the different colors looked really pretty in the process. It's a solid A. D. It's the Behringer Neutron. It doesn't do anything innovative. I would honestly give it an A though, due to its price and compatibility with Eurorack, except for the delay in overdrive. If it just didn't have those, it would get an A, but you have to kind of patch around them just because they suck. So it goes down to a B. But honestly, if you're getting into modular, this is probably the best value. So I have this, I just haven't taken the time to put it on yet, but this makes it way more usable. The Expressive E Touche. This is one of those things that I thought I would kind of have at the side of my desk for a minute and then end up putting in storage. I use it all the time. It's an amazing expression controller for the computer and the modular. I give it an A. The DF Audio Mini Bay. It's a pretty fun way to patch synths and effects. In this desktop form factor, I was really excited at first when getting it, but it's just not all that useful. I suppose it would be useful if I were trying out a bunch of pedals at once or something and wanted to switch very quickly. I'm going to give it a C as a passive patch bay because it does its job without any issues. I would give it a B or maybe even an A if these were powered mults. The Bastel Audio MIDI Looper. I feel like I tried this 10 different times, and each time I had to look up the manual PDF on my phone to refigure out how to use it. I'm okay with the learning curve, but loopers are like performance instruments. They shouldn't have a learning curve. I love Bastel Audio, and I normally would give this a C, but since the RetroKit's little calculator looper sequencer came out, I've not even touched this, so I have to bring it down to a D. I'm so sorry, Bastel. The Mod Duo X. This thing is such a powerhouse. You could make your own pedal boards in it, essentially, and their interface runs inside a web browser like Chrome, and you could just hook up to it via Ethernet. Excuse me. The Mod Company started with a very successful Kickstarter campaign, and instead of waiting to sell enough products to fund the R&D and production of their next product, they just did another Kickstarter, and it seems like they just kept kicking the cash flow can down the road. That never works out well. Hopefully companies these days learn from mistakes like that. It's not like some super shady thing. It's not like there's this business manual for crowdfunding pro audio hardware and software. The Zoom Live Track L20R. It has a lot of ins and outs. The pre's don't sound that bad. The Zoom interface is, of course, deplorable. I literally have to use my fucking iPad to adjust the panning or select what tracks are being recorded, which is just infuriating. I wish they just put an HDMI port on the back so I could just mount a little monitor up here. I guess if you need a rack-mountable or portable controller and are bringing it to a venue to hook up to a console and literally live track, then this is for you, but I just don't feel like that many people would use it for that. If you don't mind turning on the iPad, it's a great thing to hook your modular into and just get a bunch of different channel recordings to edit in your DAW later. I guess I would give it a D. The Conductive Labs Noodler, another Kickstarter project. It's a semi-generative sequencer. I feel like it's almost more of, it almost reminds me of what an arranger keyboard does with MIDI notes. So I guess I would consider it more of like a powerful arpeggiator, a dynamic arpeggiator. Anyway, I would give it a B. But speaking of Conductive Labs, we have the MRCC, which stands for, what does that stand for? MIDI Ringo Starr Control Center, I would say. There's a little editor screen here. There's MIDI DIN in and out all over the place. There's 1/8 inch in and out all over the place. There's USB in and out, and you can convert and filter and map and patch your MIDI stuff all in one device. And it's as if the company just tried to figure out what the biggest problem is with buying and playing with synthesizers, and they solved it. It's built like a tank. It's like the heart of MIDI in my entire studio, and my favorite thing is that you can send Ethernet to satellites, so you could have MIDI ports elsewhere that just run right into it at high data speeds. Easily, without question, an S-tier product. If it broke, I would freak the fuck out because my entire workflow and connection process would be destroyed. AirPatch allows you to have this little button on your guitar, and then you hook this device in the middle here up to your pedal board, and then you could patch between pedals from the wireless button on your guitar. Pretty handy, pretty clever. I've honestly never used it. It seems to be fine though. I guess a B. The analog thing, it's not actually an audio product. It is an analog computer, a very complex, capable analog computer for a relatively affordable price. Honestly, I believe that this is the last product that I ever pre-ordered. It showed up almost 2 years after it was supposed to, and they weren't very apologetic about it. Not that I need an apology, but I just felt like I got burned a little bit. But to actually put it on a tier, my number one issue with it is that it's really noisy. And I know you're wondering, how would an analog computer be noisy? Well, you could see the noise in the calculations that you make with an analog computer. I don't know if that's a thing that only exists in my studio or, C. This is the Zen USB MIDI flute. I bought it off this nice older fella at KnobCon. I don't know. I read the instructions. I was unable to get it working, but I really didn't spend that much time trying. The artwork here and on the website is very anime inspired. Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes from Pulp Fiction is, "Man, I don't even have an opinion." So to be announced, I'm not gonna attempt to tier a product that I haven't given a fair shot. Some of these things are just MIDI converters and CD DIN converters, and they just don't really belong in tiers. Focusrite Scarlett 2i4, first generation. C. The Icon Duo 44 Live. The company's marketing company reached out to me saying that this worked with iPads, and I said, "Are you sure? Because I'm gonna make an iPad video." And they said, "Yes, it works with all iPads." And I was like, "Okay, great, yeah, I'll include it in the video, sure." It didn't work with the iPad, so D. The Behringer UMC 404 HD. I think I was in Chicago working at the Adler Planetarium, and I needed a bunch of extra channels, and the audio interface that I had brought with me didn't have them. So I picked this up really quick at Guitar Center, and it worked fine, so C. Tascam Porta Studio 414 Make 2. It's a 4-track tape recorder. I adore it. It's a classic. I don't know if I adore it because it functions well or because it's a classic, but if you want lo-fi sounds, this is one of the best ways to get it. I would say a B. The Tivoli Audio Portable Audio Laboratory Bluetooth speaker. Most people who would look this up would say, hey, that's a really overpriced Bluetooth speaker for what it does. However, if you work in science or acoustic physics, this is pretty well known for being a very flat, reliable, loud little speaker for measurement purposes. So for that reason, I would give it a, yeah, it is really incredibly accurate, so I guess I'll give it an A. The original Korg Nano Control, only one knob fell off, so let's keep it at a C. Then we have the original M-Audio Fast Track Ultra, and I think the only reason I have this audio interface is just because I've had it for so long. It's probably over 20 years old at this point. Pretty reliable, it still seems to power on. I don't know if you can find modern 64-bit drivers for it though. If you are even remotely a fan of the Korg MS-2000 synthesizer, then you absolutely need to check out the Korg Radius because it's kind of the same medicine, but way, way, way more powerful and dynamic. Without going too deep into it, I would give it an A. Okay, I really need to speed this up. This is mostly going to be pedals. Death by Audio Rooms, B. Eventide H9 Max, probably an A when it came out. These days, a C. The Empress Zoya, it lives up to every fiber of hype. It is an S-tier pedal. The Empress Echo System, 2 dynamic, powerful echo pedals in one. I would give it, it's an A-tier pedal. The Peterson Strobo Stomp Tuner is by far the best tuner pedal I've ever used. This is an A-tier pedal. The Ventris Dual Reverb, very powerful. I'm not thrilled with the algorithms, but I would say it's a B-tier pedal. The Source Audio C4 Synth, very customizable, but not that powerful. D. The Behringer Tube Ultra Gain Mic 100 audiophile vacuum tube preamplifier with limiter. Very affordable. I don't know if it's a clone of something. I hope it isn't, because I actually think it's quite a handy and capable and good sounding device. I would say that this is B. The new Neighbor wet stereo reverb pedal, I have a lot more complaints than I have compliments. D. The Maris Mercury X is, in my opinion, not only the most dynamic and powerful and customizable reverb pedal, I think it is the best sounding reverb pedal in the world. S tier. The Boss RV200 has algorithms that are a definite improvement over previous Boss reverbs, which isn't really saying all that much. It came out less than a year ago and it still has that thing where it won't tell you how many milliamps it uses. You have to use the Boss PSA adapter only, and it has micro USB connectivity. Beyond that, mine just glitched out and never started working properly again. I still need to send this back to him. I want you to succeed, Boss. I want you to make a great reverb pedal, but this is a D. The GFI System Specular Tempest is quite possibly the best shimmer reverb I've ever heard all around, and it can do things that no other reverb pedal or algorithm can do. It is so close to an S tier pedal, but it is a high A tier pedal. A Morley optical volume pedal is if you need really, really precise volume control with a pedal, and you'll probably pay a little bit extra for that. But it does what it's supposed to do. I'd give it a B. The Quick Lock very not optical volume pedal more or less does what it's supposed to do, kind of shittily, so, and it's made out of very cheap plastic, so a D. We got the Boss GR55 MIDI Dicker. Pretty old at this point. Pretty sure it's over 10 years old. The sounds are always really bad on it. It's a D, probably. The Roland VG99 guitar MIDI Dicker, I would say that this is easily the best MIDI guitar synthesizer or MIDI guitar device ever made. It's an A tier. And that's a shame because it's quite old, so you can imagine my excitement a few years ago when the SY1000 came out. I made a very long video about it, and maybe they have some new firmware and things are a little bit better, but it was pretty mid-grade, probably less than mid-grade. I don't want to give it a D, that's really hard. Yeah. The TC Helicon Voice Live Touch 2. Unfortunately, it has been cursed with the rubber that biodegrades after 10 years into maple syrup. This does a lot of really handy things quite well. It doesn't do anything great, but I've played no less than 100 shows with it, and it's been quite a valuable tool for that purpose. Even with the maple syrup rubber, I give it a B. This is a Zoom B3 bass effects processor. It has quite a few different effects that you could load in these different little windows here. It has a looper. It's pretty basic. It sounds pretty decent. For once with Zoom, the UI is pretty usable. I give it a B. The Zoom Sample Track ST224, it is a tabletop sampler. It's pretty capable. It's not great. I give it a C. The Boss DR550 Make 2. I love the way this thing sounds. I still have the original manual and box and everything. I give it a, well, yeah, I give it a B. This is a Nux Cerberus. It's a Chinese pedal. It's just like a bunch of different pedals that are all kind of strung together in one unit, yet it's not really like a MultiFX unit, if that makes any sense. And then you could even patch them around a little bit. The user interface is super easy to get to use. I mean, I give it a B. I bet y'all thought I was gonna say something bad about it because it was a Chinese pedal. Yeah, right, I ain't getting canceled over no commie guitar pedal. The Alesis Anico, God, I wish they made things like this. Look at this list of effects. It has so much going on with it. This one was made in 2002. Again, I've played hundreds of gigs with this thing back in the day, and it stood up to the test of time. It still boots up and works just fine. It's a really good little effect processor. I have to give it an A. Here's one that you probably can't find that easily. The Stanton SCS4 DJ. It's a standalone DJ system with a lot of different looping effects, things like that. It's made pretty cheaply, yet it stood up for a lot of gigs where I just had it playing a couple different backing tracks. I don't use it anymore, but I still have it as a backup. Not that I really play shows anymore, but yeah, I mean, I guess a B. Another goodie that time is kind of forgotten, the Pioneer RMX 500. I don't think I've ever actually used it in the studio, but I've used it in a ton of shows, and virtually every other artist I played with was like, what is that thing? That thing is so powerful. And it really is. You could do crazy builds and sequence effects and loop effects and things like that. I wish they made more stuff like this. It is a little bit outdated these days, but It is a solid A. The Mackie 402VL Z3, totally capable little mixer, but they just had to have a little proprietary connector. You couldn't just plug it into a normal plug. So now you have this botched mess back here. I'm just gonna throw this thing out. I'm done with it. Model number RP3503-B battery operated cassette recorder. If you want some super shitty lo-fi sounds, this is your boy. I don't know, it sounds like crap, so it's like a D. The Behringer Model FEX 800. This thing is so light, I feel like it's like filled with helium, like it's just gonna fly away. I've honestly never used it. I don't know why I have it. I think I was actually given it as a gift many, many years ago. All right, yeah, I'm not gonna put it on a tier list. The Akai/FL Studio Fire Controller. I've never really given it that much use because I don't use that system for programming FL Studio, so it seems to work just fine though, so I guess I would give it a C. The Alesis Bitterman. This is one of the only bit reduction effects that I've ever really dug, and it is amazing. It's beautiful on a TB303. It's also nearly impossible to find these days. I would give it a B. The Alesis Mic Tube Duo. I really don't like it for anything other than drum overheads. And for drum overheads, for some reason, I love the way that the cymbal crashes dither. This is so hard to describe. It's like sometimes cymbals and hi-hats sound sizzly over the overhead microphones when you're miking up a drum set, and this removes that sizzle, but not in the way an EQ would do it. I feel like I'm on drugs or something trying to explain this. It just works for me, that's why I keep it around. Oh, and I guess C. The Behringer Xenix 1202 effects mixer. It has one of those stupid proprietary plugs that is going in the trash, F. The Black Star Distortion X. This is like some napalm death style distortion. I hate the way it sounds on guitars. I love the way it sounds on raw oscillators. I would give it a B. We got the original Electron Analog 4 and Analog Rhythm. I would rate the Analog 4 a C. I would give the original Analog Rhythm a B. A Schroen-Hut Melodica. I'll show it to you really fast. It's just a good melodica. Melodicas are excellent ways to communicate with string players, like a violinist or a cellist, because you can kind of go wah, 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 and show them how aggressively or lightly a phrase should be played or where the swells should be. Really a great use for it. This is a rain stick. C. My friend Brock, who made my modular case by hand, made this for me as a gift. Beautiful stuff. Pedals, rapid fire, Strymon Night Sky. That is an A. Micro amp headphone amplifier. I haven't used it. The Empress Parallel Compressor, Make 2. That is another A. The Empress Bass Parallel Compressor. That is another A. The Singular Sound MIDI Maestro. I haven't turned it on in about 2 years, but the firmware was pretty buggy. I would give it a D. The Empress Para EQ, I would give that it's a good EQ, but I would give it a B because it's just an EQ pedal. However, the Empress Para EQ Deluxe, I would give an A. The Empress is gonna get a lot of A's. They make really quality things. The Empress Reverb. It's a little outdated now. At one point, it was the best reverb pedal in the world. Now it is, the second or third best reverb pedal in the world, so let's give it an A. Chase Bliss Generation Loss Make 2. Great pedal. I love putting the polyend tracker through it, for example. The pins on the back, sometimes I forget they exist. It's still an A pedal. It's just like extra things that I'm not paying attention to. The Maris LVS delay pedal is probably the most powerful delay pedal in the world. I would give it an A. The TC Electronic Flashback ×4 delay and looper. I have this for one very specific purpose, and that video hasn't come out yet. It may never come out. I guess I would give it a B. It's a pretty good pedal, and it's pretty affordable. The VSN Twin Looper. This is like one of those pedals you could get on Amazon or Wayfair for like 50 bucks. D. The Soma Cosmos Drifting Memory Station. A+, very close to S tier. I don't know whether to call it a reverb or a delay or a granular pedal, but whatever it is, it's A+. The Azure Leon Drive. It has a little like low pass and high pass filter selector on here. It just gives extra volume to your signal, and I think it costs like $19.99 or something. So, I mean, I guess a B. It sounds fine. The MultiFX Verbs has a bunch of impulses on it and some neat controls. Some of the impulses are really creative sounding. I did not expect it to be as cool as it was. I would give it a B+. There's also the what is this pedal called? The MultiFX, well, anyway, whatever it is, it's a bunch of amp synths and things like LFOs that can control them in this really kind of interesting touchscreen interface. I love it. I'd give it a B. No, you know what? I take that back. I give this an A. The Electro Harmonic Super Ego Synth Engine. 10 years ago, I really liked it, and I just wished it was stereo. Now things like the Soma Labs Cosmos has made it completely irrelevant, so I guess let's be nice. I'll give it a C. The Singular Sound Eris Loop Studio could be the most powerful looper pedal in the world. However, I feel like the interface is a little bit too touchscreeny and laggy for me to use at gigs, but I do love playing with it at home, so I'll give it a C. Another MultiFX pedal, I believe that this is their first one. It's the Bebo, and it has like a touchscreen interface where you could connect different nodes. The Bebo is very powerful, but I feel like the bigger message with the Eris and the Bebo and things like that is maybe touch screens aren't the best on pedals. But if you're willing to put it on a desk and dive in, you can get some pretty crazy soundscapes, so I would give it a B. The Union Tube and Transistor Tone Druid. I absolutely love the way that this thing sounds on bass. It's like my go-to bass preamp, essentially. I would give it an A. It's the classic Mimi Pure Boost, another one of those little Amazon Wayfair booster pedals. I think I'd give this one a B. It does its job quite well, and it's super affordable. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot the dusty old Rocktron Banshee Talkbox pedal and tube that you put in your mouth and vibrate your teeth with. I mean, I use that about once every 10 years, but it works beautifully when I do use it, so a B. The Art Dual Direct Box. It does its job just fine, so let's give it a C. The Zoom H6. Man, this is one of my favorite Zoom recorders, as the interface is somewhat usable, but this has the maple syrup syndrome. This stays kind of out of sight, out of mind, and I have this Zoom ECM6 cable, and then I hang this XYH6 Black above the piano as an overhead for piano recording. Oh, so nasty. Look at this. It served its purpose for a very long time, so let's give it a C. I forgot about this. It's going to go in the pedal box. So this is a Roland EF303, which is another one of Roland's terrible 303 emulations, and you could actually program the notes via this. However, one thing that you could do with this that's really awesome is it has stereo and microphone input, and then you can run them through a filter bank that is controllable via steps. There are a lot of really unusual functions that are really ahead of its time. So I give it a B. Tektronix 2236 oscilloscope. I have two of them. This one's a bit brighter. However, this one, I think I actually have two of these. I think the other one's the same model. This one's a little bit brighter. However, the trade-off for that extra brightness is that the first week or so that I had it, every time I turned it on, it literally smelled like I had a roommate who was a smoker. The other one I'll probably just give away to a friend locally. The Solman MIDI foot controller. I use this for a lot of gigs. It's very customizable. It's very reliable. I mean, why not give it an A? Obviously, one doesn't need more than 1 or 2 metronomes, but clacking them all together is so much fun. We have some Alesis Elevate 5 Make 2 monitors. I've really only used them for playing around with synths at the table. They are obviously very inexpensive monitors, and I would not recommend using them for mastering or anything like that. There's a lot of consumer grade speakers that cost twice as much as these that aren't even as loud, that sound nowhere near as good. So I don't know, I guess if you just need some speakers to listen to music or jam with synths on. All right, let's do microphones. Might as well start with this one. This is the DJI wireless microphone. A lot of people in the comments have said that it sounds like shit. I think for a lav mic, it sounds excellent. It hooks up to DJI cameras. I have a receiver for it that could hook up to a hot shoe for DSLRs. And it also has a 32-bit internal audio recorder, and the memory's inside, no memory cards or anything. So it could still have that water resistance or whatever else. This is the new one, by the way, the most recent DJI microphone to come out as of Monday, June 10th, 2024. I give it an A. I think it's actually worked out really great, and the battery life's amazing. I don't have any complaints other than the DJI logo being in front, which I've circumvented with some tape. The Rode VideoMic Pro, this is like the go-to for everybody. I think I would honestly give it like a C+. It's not bad. It's a little better than average, I guess. Now the Asden SMX30, which I'm pretty sure is less money than the Rode VideoMic Pro, also has a stereo mode, and it also has this really nice function where you could just put it on battery, and when your camera turns on, it'll detect the voltage through the 1/8" port and then automatically turn the mic on. For what it is and for how much it costs, I think it's excellent. I would give it an A. Oh dear. The Sennheiser DP, just kidding, the Sennheiser MKE 440. It's a stereo mic. I think it sounds pretty good. This cable is so thin that it's almost impossible for me to use this without getting a literal ground hum on it. And it's infuriating because this is actually a pretty expensive video mic, and I've never used it for anything other than testing it out and swearing at it. I don't remember where I bought it, but it was difficult to return it. So an F. The Zoom SGH6 shotgun mic, they don't make this anymore. It is a mono shotgun mic. I actually kind of like the way it sounds with my voice, so I would give it a C. Now, if we're going to be rating microphones, I should point out that anything above a B is going to be extremely subjective. So for example, the Sennheiser MKE 600, I would give it a C. It does its job pretty well for a shotgun mic. It doesn't sound the greatest. I always have to EQ the bass up a little bit. Now, this probably sounds great with Venus Theory's voice because he has a very loud, distinct, thick voice. Now, the microphone that sounds best for me with videos, and the one that everybody always asks me what microphone I'm using for my monologue, the Rode NTG3B is an extremely full-sounding, bassy shotgun mic. And for my little nasally voice, it works fine. I never have to EQ it. I don't even have to put a de-esser on it most of the time. So the Rode NTG3B would get an A from me. Do I have any other mics? The Rode Reporter. This microphone is literally for super loud places like sports events and stuff like that. And it sounds like dog shit. It just sounds terrible. I think it sounds way worse than lavs that don't pick up as much background noise. So maybe mine is messed up because I have brought it around a lot of places. Unfortunately, I would give it an F, and I think it's the only Rode device that I would get an F. I have two S-tier microphones. The Rode NT-SF1 ambisonic microphone. For what it does, it is dirt cheap. I believe it's like $1,000 or $1,100. If I could only have one microphone, it would probably be this microphone because this microphone is so dynamic. If you need a shotgun microphone, you could actually decode the ambisonic in a way to where the surrounding sounds will be canceled out and you will actually project the voice you would in the case of a narrow shotgun microphone. With just a little bit of encoding, it could be a Dolby Atmos field recording microphone, or it could be a VR microphone. It's an S-tier microphone. A matched pair of Rode M5s. These are really good drum overheads for me if I want to capture subtleties, if I'm playing like a brush kit. For everything else, I've disconnected them. I hate them for everything else. They're amazing at one thing, they serve that purpose, so I give them a C. A matched pair of Rode NT1As. These microphones are dirt cheap for how good they are, and they are so dynamic. They're great for guitars, they're great for vocals. For the first couple of years of this channel, I would literally just sort of mount it out of frame here, and it would pick up my voice from that far away with really good quality. Just considering the value, they're probably an A. This is the MXL 2001. The 2001 is, in my opinion, only really good if you're recording a really loud vocal or screaming. It functions really well in those cases, but for subtle things, the noise floor is a little bit too high. It's kind of a specialty, but it kind of sucks too, so I would give it a D+. The MXL 990. I've used this as a kick drum microphone. For anything else, it's utterly failed. I don't even think I would use it as a kick drum microphone right now. I would give it a D. The Lawton Audio LS 208 is by far the best voiceover microphone I've ever heard in my entire life, and I very rarely use it on this channel because it is so good that any other scene with like a shotgun or any other microphone, it actually is super distracting because I can't mix anything to sound as good as this Lawton does. It is an S-tier microphone if you are looking for a voiceover microphone. And of course, the Zoom XYH6, it's a little noisy, probably a little bit too noisy. Yeah, it would not be my first choice or even like second or third or fourth choice for field recording. I have a few different room measurement mics, and this one doesn't even have a model number. I don't know of one that's better than the other. I know I have one that was like 350 bucks, and then I have like the super cheap Behringer one, and they all just have a pretty flat readout, which is the whole point. I guess they all get a C. The Voodoo Lab Pedal Power ISO 5. Did another video where I explained that most of like the isolated pedal power things that you buy on Amazon are actually not isolated. And in fact, if it has a DC in plug on a multi-pedal power and it says it's isolated, it is almost certainly not. Look for these, look for the AC plugs, because that means that it's actually isolating it to different direct current channel. I actually bought 3 of these, I think. I like them so much. A. Now behind me here we have an Arturia Keylab 61. That is a great mid-level MIDI controller. I would give it a B. We have a Roland FA06. It's an old school workstation, not that old school. It has a pretty powerful piano roll style sequencer on it. If you're actually playing in things, it's pretty good. The sounds are, you know, dog shit. It's a decent sequencer. The sampler is kind of terrible. I don't think those pads are velocity sensitive, so I would give it a C. Up here we have a Roland JX305. Most people watching this would absolutely hate this thing. The learning curve is huge. It is very, very frustrating to make sequences, but I owe so much of my career to it. Obviously, you could see that it's very used. I've had it since the late 90s. A lot of my older, more notable songs as the flashbulb were sequenced on this. I did a video about that, trying to remake one of the older songs. For my purposes, I would give it an S, because the sequencer on it is so insanely powerful for what I was using at the time, but in reality, we have to give it a D. Behringer DeepMind 12, I actually bought this, I think the day that the Guitar Center started getting them in stock. I was on tour and I had a couple days off and I played with it in my hotel room and I was very impressed with it. I wish Behringer would make more things like this rather than clones of things that already existed. I do really like the oscillator filter design on this and everything. Anyway, I'm gonna give it a B. You can barely even see this, but it's an Alesis recital. I would give that a solid C. Over here we have a Denon DJ Prime 4. I used this for some of the more recent gigs in 2022, just as mostly a backing track player. It does its job quite well. I'd say I'd give it a B. Hydrosynth, the original one. I always kind of forget that this exists, and then I play with it for a little bit and I really like it again. The effects are meh, but it's a really solid digital synthesizer and I would give it a B. The Yamaha Montage, as somebody who had been on the Yamaha Montage development team, not for the original, but for the newer one, I am a bit biased. I think I would give it an A if you perform live or if you just like playing keyboard and piano. The Korg M50 is one of the most vaporwave keyboards ever. I would give it a C. The Expressive V Osmos is vastly underrated. Nobody plays with the Egan Matrix or the Hacken Editor. It is an S-tier synth and MPE controller. There's nothing like it. It's an incredible physical modeling adventure. The Arturia Keylab 88 Make 2, the keys are so heavy and realistic that they are much heavier than my upright piano. I think this is the most realistic and best MIDI controller or piano emulating controller that I've ever played, and I would give it an A+. The original Arturia Polybrute, it's dusty because it was sitting up there on a synth stand. If you've seen my video on it, you know it's an S tier. I absolutely love it. The Yamaha MX100A Disc Clave Air piano. It is an upright piano that takes discs, but it also has MIDI in and out down there, and it has 88 different solenoids. I never use the MIDI. I only use it to make like Instagram videos and stuff like that. But as a piano, it needs tuning. I really love the intimate sound on it, and I've not heard that in other MX100s. So while I really just love playing the piano and I would love to upgrade to a Grand, the sound on this thing is just way too organic for me to give it up. I don't know what it is about this particular piano, but it does an amazing job. I would give it an A. I've already done a video rating all of my modules, essentially. I'm not going to do that again. The Behringer Ultra Gain Digital Model ADA 8200 is it's a so-so 8-in, 8-out ADAT interface. If that's all you need, that's fine. The pre's are not good, but they're not bad, and it does its job. So with the affordability, I would actually give it a B. The Samson S-Patch C does its job. There is some interesting cheapo reverb on the TC Electronic M300. So personally, I would give that like a C, but realistically, it's probably like a D. These are the iLouds, or the professional series. They have self-calibration. I don't think that self-calibration works very well in a room like this, in an actual treated room. I've only had them for about 4 months, and I'm generally pretty unhappy with them. Every mix that I made ends up sounding a little bit wonky when I listen to it in the car or on headphones. Maybe the calibration firmware wasn't finished when they released it. Maybe it's just not a great monitor. I don't know. I like the folks over at IK, and I like the features of this monitor, and I like the way it looks. I like the size, but it'll probably just be a monitor for my modular or something like that. So I'm gonna give them a D. The Mackie Big Knob Studio, C. The Roland FC300 MIDI foot controller, probably one of the worst values in all MIDI controllers. I think I paid like $800 for this. It works with the VG99 flawlessly, but it just shouldn't cost as much as it did. It's designed to do one thing. It still works after being mistreated on tour for a decade, so I guess I'll give it a C. The RME Fireface 802. I've had this since it first came out, which is over a decade now, I believe. Like last week, they updated the firmware and driver and added full Atmos support. I have an open mind, but I'm not sure that I will ever use an audio interface for my main mixing room that isn't an RME. I've had such good experiences with this company, and their drivers are just infallible. Unless you have really bad luck or something, this should be the last audio interface that you ever buy. It is an S-tier audio interface. Down here, for some weird reason, we have the Alesis Akira, which is a rack unit with not that many controls. If you remember in the other part of the video, there's that little super powerful Alesis Anico desktop effects unit. This has 2 of those. That should be like super powerful and exciting and amazing, but I think the form factor of the Anico is what made it so special. I have really never used this, even after seeking it out, because it's actually a pretty rare thing. So the Akira, D. The Franklin SS6 stereo input switcher, very handy device. Frankly, surprised that more companies aren't making devices that do things like this, but we have Franklin, so yay. B tier. The CGB95 old school original crybaby dusty wah pedal. It's a classic sound, and it still works after like 30 years, so give it an A. Oh, and there's a KRK 10-inch sub down there. Most people scoff at KRK monitors. I've never actually used their normal monitors, only the sub, and that one I've had forever, and it's a great sub. I love it. It's fine. I've never been compelled to upgrade until now. Now that I have this new room, I'd obviously like a better calibrated, more professional sounding sub, which you'll find out all about in another video. And look how fucking gross it is down there. This thing survived these conditions for, you know, decades. Yeah, B. We'll give it an A tier. Oh my God, this is a fucking disaster, eh? All right, Audio-Technica ATH M50X STS. I really like the M50s. I think they sound quite good. These have a microphone attached to it, so it's great for streaming. The Sennheiser HD650, these are classic. They're excellent headphones. Almost good enough to master in, obviously. If you need bass in anything, it's not gonna be good enough to master in. No headphone is. The Bear Dynamic 880 Pro. These are semi-open, but they're really fluffy, and if they fit nicely on your head, and they might not, because you have a giant fucking head. I don't know if anybody ever told you that. You might actually forget that you have them on, because they are very comfy. They're lightweight for how big they are, and they sound excellent, and you get some airflow, so you don't get really the same ear fatigue that you would get with closed headphones. Okay, not in frame. They're upstairs in my go bag because I'll be wearing them tonight probably. Shure Aonic 2, absolutely love them. They are my favorite Bluetooth headphones. Obviously they're pretty big, but the latency is good. The response is very much good enough to work on music with. I'm blown away. The Sony W something 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 5, it's their newest flagship earbuds. They sound excellent. The Noise canceling's excellent. The microphone sounds excellent, but motherfucker, this case always says that it's open, and then music will start playing in my pocket, or a call will transfer to my pocket. It will just have a pop-up on my phone. It drains my battery, and this is like a common issue with them. If you like look on Reddit or something. It's such a bummer. I hope they do a recall because I really do love the headphones otherwise. A few things that I forgot from my living room. One of those would be the Korg MS2000R. I obviously put some of my own knobs on there because most of the original knobs fell off. The MS2000 and MS2000R in general, for its age, is an absolutely incredible value for really spacious, active, animated pads, and it has a pretty awesome vocoder in it as well. The only problem, of course, would be the voice limitation, which would bring it from an A down to a B for me. This is the Roland Jazz Chorus 22. The Jazz Chorus line of Roland amps are stereo amps with a really great chorus sound. I think that the Jazz Chorus series are S-tier amps, and I use this with synths all the time. I actually like it better than most keyboard amps for that purpose. This Behringer 2600 is in mint condition because I barely ever touched it in the year when it was right next to me in my studio. And that is not because I think it's a bad piece of gear. I think it's really well made. I think it actually sounds pretty damn close to a 2600. It's just that this made me realize that I don't really like 2600. This is, if not the best clone that they've made, this is certainly one of the best clones that they made, and I think they did quite a great job. So let's just call it a B. Eurorack Pro RX 1202FX, that is made by Behringer as well. And the best thing it has going for it is that it is an extremely compact rack-mounted mixer that actually has faders in case you need to quickly move things up and down. Everything else about it sucks. It's noisy, it has scratchy pots, the input-output is not all that great, the effects suck. It's like a D, maybe. So there are some things that were already in bags or placed in a box already or on a different floor when I was filming, or maybe in a different house when I was moving, that I've already taken a picture of and itemized for my insurance. But they are things that I use or have used somewhat regularly, and I feel like I should include them. The Focusrite Compounder compressor, which is right in a rack in front of me here, is one of my favorite compressors of all time, and the way that it handles bass is really unique. I'm not going to describe every last detail, but it works really, really well for my style of mixing and mastering, and for its price at the time when it was commercially available, I would say that it is easily an S-tier compressor. All right, so field recorders. We have the Zoom H4n, which at the time was a pretty awesome revolutionary field recorder. I feel like it kind of transcended pro audio and went into film. Let's give it a B. I already covered the H6. It feels like it's covered in fucking maple syrup. I have such a like-hate relationship with the H8. It has a lot of tools that make recording instruments really good. However, these inputs, these are only XLR here, and then these are hybrid inputs. The weird diamond pear shape of this thing is just really confusing. I wish that there was a way to turn off the screen here to preserve battery life, because the battery life on it's actually not that great in comparison to other Zoom recorders. Ultimately, though, I guess we just have to give it a solid C, because it really is in the middle with its capability and its stupidness. I have two versions of the Zoom M4. The original version, I bought it right when it first came out. You could literally rub input or low cut or M4 mic track with your thumb and the text would literally come off. Then something much worse happened. It stopped signing or writing the files on the SD card. So the memory would stay on the SD card, but you would actually have to do a full file recovery on it to be able to hear what you had just recorded. This had actually happened to me quite a few times, and I just assumed that I was a dummy and I didn't press the record button or something like that. But sure enough, it was the device. I did contact Zoom. They had me send this one back in, and then like a month later, I got one back that seems to be from a newer batch. The text would no longer wipe off and stuff. And so far, I haven't used it that much because now I'm terrified to use it because I don't want to lose my data. But so far, anytime I have used it, I've not had that same SD card problem. I'm going to give it a probationary D. Now there's a Zoom F6, which records 192 kilohertz at 32-bit and is one of the best recorders on the market, in my opinion. It has 6 inputs. They're all XLR. it's much more solid than any of the H or M series hardware. Like, it's made out of metal and everything just feels like it's well made and can last a very long time in pretty rough conditions. It encodes automatically to ambisonic A or B. It could be USB powered. It could be, I think, AA battery powered. It could also be powered by those big standard Sony batteries that anybody in photography or videography has probably come across because they're typically used to power lights and things like that. Like pretty much all of Zoom's products, the downside is the user interface. It never feels intuitive. Another really annoying thing about it that just boggles my mind is it doesn't have any sort of internal memory battery that just keeps the date and time in it, for example. And so anytime that you switch those AA batteries or those Sony batteries or anything like that, you will have to put in the date and time in the terrible interface the next time you turn the unit on. And guess what? Most of the time when you turn a field recorder on, you're in the fucking field. You're in a rainy forest, or you're trying to record an event that has already started, and you have to spend 90 seconds inserting the date and time, or just putting like 000 and all the defaults into it, and then everything gets encoded wrong. I'm not trying to be a Karen. I am still trying to be objective, by the way, but you have to understand the amount of swearing that I've done at this unit because of this internal battery memory thing. It's so close to being an A-tier product, and a few design decisions could have made it an S-tier field recorder, but unfortunately, it's a B. Okay, the Zoom F3 field recorder is about this big. I own a grand total of 3 of them. They are incredibly handy for sound on location or for a YouTuber. I can literally just clip it onto the side of a tripod and then have an alternate source of 32-bit recording for my voice when I'm doing a monologue, for example. The UI and the settings are predictably, of course, painful to use, but it doesn't matter so much on this because there's not that many settings. It doesn't have a metronome. It doesn't record 16 or 24-bit. That's not them being lazy. That's by design. It doesn't even have a volume control for your headphones because 32-bit is so dynamic, you could just set the waveform window and listen at the same time and just record however it feels comfortable. Of course, the UI could be better and the battery life could be better and all that stuff, so it's not quite an S-tier product, but it's pretty close, except for one really bad thing. The mortal sin of field recorders. Just 2 nights ago, I had my Zoom F3, I had my Lawton audio microphone, and I went into downtown Atlanta to record hours upon hours of a Brazilian vocalist's voice in Portuguese and Spanish to create a voice swap dataset that she would be paid royalty for. I was keeping a very close eye on the recorder the entire time just to make sure that it wasn't running out of batteries, and I even changed batteries at a point. So batteries are fine, it was powered correctly, it definitely was recording, I heard the beep, I saw the red light, and it had a compatible micro SD card. And then the next afternoon, when we looked at that SD card, there was only one WAV file on it, and it was only about 45 seconds long. And it was just of us talking in the background, getting ready to start one of the dataset sessions. Late last night, instead of finishing this video, I was spending hours scanning the card with various types of data recovery software, and it just didn't record the data. It said it did, it had the red light, it had the beep, but it didn't record a fucking thing other than that 1-minute file. 9 out of 10 times I would just raise my hand and say, probably user error. But I was watching the thing like a hawk, and there was someone else there. If you couldn't tell from the absurd amount of field recorders that I have, I field record a lot on a daily basis. And right now, I'm having a little bit of an existential crisis because I'm terrified to ever use a Zoom F-Series recorder again. And then come to think of it, with the file issues that the M-Series had, I'm actually a little bit terrified to use any of Zoom's field recorders, which is a big deal because I own a lot of them and I use them all the time. This device right here not only wasted many, many hours of a musician's time and my time, it wasted money because I paid a session fee. And finally, at least to this client, it made me and my company look unprofessional. So I'm sorry, you get a hard F. Okay, moving on. That's my TD-17 V-Drum kit. I had my old V-Drum kit for like 12 years, and I upgraded just for the sake of upgrading, which is never a good idea. And now on this upgraded version, there's seemingly less sounds, less demo songs and exercises to play along with. The hi-hat, crash, and ride cymbal seemingly only have one zone. They don't have multiple zones like my old one. I'm just really disappointed. I would have thought that in that last decade, V-drums would have gotten tremendously better than they used to be. If it wasn't such a big package and thing, I probably would have returned it because I was on the fence for a while. D. I keep thinking of more and more things. Let's just end on a happy note. the RetroKits RK8 real-time multi-track MIDI recorder. Do not let that description lie to you. It's also a beat sequencer, a step sequencer, MIDI filter, transposer, a looper, and despite this cool, sleek, trendy interface, it actually is not that difficult to learn just by playing with it. It took me about an hour to get a hang of even the more advanced features, and you know what? It fits right here. It can fit right on top of your synthesizers or right next to your synthesizers, and it adds a tremendous amount of functionality to them. More importantly, with the looping and everything, it just makes them jammable, and you will just end up playing them more as a result of this sequencer. And I'm going to give this an A+, but I think that with a few slight changes, it could be an S tier in the next iteration. Honestly, from the heart, I can't fucking do this anymore. Hopefully this video helped someone out there fall asleep. If you are a gear manufacturer, or if you work for a gear company and I rated a piece of gear a little bit lower or a lot lower than you expected, I am sorry. I just want you to know that it's just my opinion on that piece of gear. I tried to disconnect all strings from any relationship with companies, so I may actually love you and not like the piece of gear, or I may actually love the piece of gear and really dislike the company. I should also mention that the vast majority of this stuff I paid for, or paid full price for, and a lot of it I paid full price for up to 25 years ago, because I'm a bit of a gear hoarder. For example, the JX305, I think I bought that in like 1998 or something. Now, if you're wondering how I paid for all of this stuff, that would be a much longer and more tedious video. But what I can tell you is that no piece of music gear in my possession, to my knowledge, was paid for with Patreon money. All of the money that I make from my Patreon and most of the money that I make from things like sponsors or YouTube ads all goes into a nonprofit which just funds the next series of videos on this channel. And on a more personal note, strangely and unexpectedly, this video felt a little invasive to make. And I don't really know why, because I don't have any problem sharing what gear I use or techniques I use about anything. But for some reason, it just feels weird to have it all out there. And like a month ago, halfway through making the video, I almost threw in the towel and just stopped making it entirely. But then I thought, like, how silly that is when one of the last videos I made on this channel was talking about the software that Aphex Twin uses, and Richard James himself was so kind to tell me all of these secrets so I could tell you and share it with the world. And from my perspective as a YouTube viewer, I would love to see other pro audio YouTubers do a video like this. It's such a fun, dorky, voyeuristic thing to watch, isn't it? Anyway, I'm glad that I made it. I hope that you enjoyed it, or it helped you sleep, and I hope it didn't hurt any brand's peepees. This video obviously doesn't have any sponsors other than viewers like yourself, and I have such an exciting, optimistic year planned for this channel with so many crazy deep rabbit holes and educational videos, and it's going to be amazing. And if you want to be part of that and support that, or if you just want to be part of Sim Selections, the monthly songwriting challenge, and if you want access to both released and unreleased music, audio assets, ambisonic field recordings, and a whole lot more, my Patreon is for you, and it costs as little as $1. Thanks for watching. Keep creating. Bye.